Yo, what's up, chefs? It's Vinny. Are you viciously consuming Path of Exile 2 content while desperately awaiting the early access release? Well, first off, you're not alone. But maybe you're also wondering what class is going to be best for you to start out with. So, whether you want something that feels like Kronos, the god of time, Aang from Avatar The Last Airbender, or even if you just want to summon an army of minions and pull off your best Lich King cosplay, or anything in between, then this video is for you. So grab a snack and relax, because I'm going to break down all of the classes and their ascendancies that will be available on early access launch and help you make the right choice to ensure your initial PoE 2 experience is amazing. First up, I'm going to go over one of my two potential picks for early access release, and that's going to be the Sorceress. If you're someone that likes to zap, freeze, or combust your enemies with dazzling animations in a screen-wide fashion from a distance, then look no further, as this is probably going to be the class for you. Essentially coming across as the quintessential mage or spellcaster, the Sorceress doesn't actually have a signature weapon like the other classes, although you'll probably find yourself using staves and wands more often than not. And a unique feature added in PoE 2 is that at least some of these weapons will have a default spell attached to them for free, so in the unlikely event that you run out of mana, it won't result in you just having to bonk your enemies. You'll actually still be casting some sort of likely to be less effective spell. The two Ascendancy options available at early access will be the Stormweaver and the Chronomancer, each boasting a quite unique playstyle from one another, and although completely unconfirmed, I personally would expect a third Ascendancy to likely have a focus on fire in some way in the future. As for the Stormweaver though, based on the information we have so far, you can pretty much expect to be a master of lightning and ice with a plethora of AoE capabilities. One of the signature aspects of the Stormweaver seems to be the ability to conjure up elemental storms passively whenever you land critical hits with your other spells, with a synchronized 5-second cooldown and duration. However, with the ability to further reduce the cooldown of this effect, it's pretty likely that you'll have multiple storms just wreaking havoc at all times as you get into the endgame. As for the Chronomancer, this is potentially one of the most unique archetypes I've ever seen attempted to be added into a game. I have heard that there is something sort of similar in Guild Wars 2, but I've never really played that game, so I can't say for sure. Anyways though, to me, this just reminds me of Kronos from Greek mythology, as you will literally have the ability to freeze and rewind time as you see fit. If that wasn't enough to pique your interest, it's also worth noting that this Ascendancy seems to have some interesting mechanics related to cooldown management, such as a percentage chance for abilities to not invoke a cooldown at all, or even just the active ability to be able to reset all of your cooldowns, making for some potentially game-breaking combinations. It's worth keeping in mind though that this Ascendancy will likely require a fair bit of game knowledge to get good value out of, and may not be the most beginner-friendly. Next up is the Monk, the second of my two potential first options. If you're a fan of quick and agile melee archetypes, and you also have a fondness of flashy elemental combos, or if you are just a dirty Flicker Strike enjoyer in PoE 1, then this is probably going to be the class for you. The Monk's signature weapon is the Quarterstaff, but I'll go ahead and take the opportunity to mention here that just because a class has a signature weapon, doesn't mean you have to stick with it or even conform to the class's typical skill choices in any way. Your imagination really is the limit for your creative potential within this game. But each of the classes, and more importantly their ascendancies, do provide you with solid foundations for different archetypes that you might be interested in. The two available ascendancies to the Monk are going to be the Invoker, a master of using the elements in melee combat, or the Acolyte of Chaiula, basically just an edgy member of a cult or something along those lines. The Invoker is, in my opinion, almost a copy-paste of the Stormweaver Ascendancy, but just in a melee format, as it has a very similar signature aspect in the form of creating Elemental Blast on critical melee hits. The chosen element will depend on your highest attribute: Fire for Strength, Lightning for Dexterity, and Ice for Intelligence, which just looks insanely cool and fun to play with. In addition to that, you'll also have the ability to build up Unbound Fury when inflicting elemental ailments, before eventually consuming it all to transform into an Unbound Avatar, which is supposed to vastly increase your effectiveness with the elements. The Acolyte of Chaiula seems like it's going to be a monk that has succumbed to the dark side, who will turn away from the natural elements and rather have a refined focus on harnessing the power of chaos and darkness. This Ascendancy looks particularly good for those of you that enjoy focusing on energy shield builds. One of its signature effects is also the ability to step into the breach at will, where you engage with an almost minigame-like feature of collecting flames on the ground that all reward you with different but very powerful buffs for doing so. Moving on, we have the Mercenary, which is shaping up to possibly be some sort of a fan favorite going into early access. This class seems pretty unique within the ARPG genre, as it has been described by the developers to essentially be a first-person shooter experience, but adapted to fit within the POE universe. Their signature weapon is going to be the crossbow, which is supposed to have 3 distinct variations resembling that of a shotgun, assault rifle, or finally a sniper rifle. Beyond that, you will also be able to choose to go for more explosions by focusing on grenades, which seem to be capable of extreme amounts of AoE damage. The 2 available Ascendancies are going to be the Witch Hunter and the Gemling Legionnaire. The Witch Hunter seems like it's giving off a sort of mage killer vibe that has potentially incredible ways to mitigate spell damage. Additionally, one of the signature aspects that has a lot of people turning their heads is the ability to have a chance to cause enemies you kill to explode, doing 100% of their max life as AoE damage around them. When you pair this with the ability to passively get Decimating Strikes and Culling Strikes, which cause you to do increased damage to enemies at full HP, and also execute enemies below a certain threshold, the Witch Hunter certainly has the potential to be one of the fastest map clearing Ascendancies in the game. The Gemling Legionnaire is noted as someone who has decided to integrate himself with gems almost in a cyborg-like manner, and comes across as a bit of an oddball at first glance in the fact that it doesn't really boast to be useful at anything in particular, rather gives you a bunch of additional ways for you to specialize in something of your choice, or even go balls to the wall and create some sort of an amalgamation of a build. The way it accomplishes this is by providing a number of unique effects to increase your overall capabilities with skill gems, including quality increase to skill gems, plus levels to all skill gems, additional skill gem slots, lower cost for skills, and the ability to use duplicate support gems in multiple skills which no other class can do, and much more. However, due to the fact that we don't have a ton of knowledge on skill gems, support gems, and items as of yet, this will probably be an Ascendancy that's best left to the veteran players to figure out, and if you're a beginner, I certainly would not recommend it unless you really like the theme or are interested in a unique challenge. Up next, we have the Witch, one of the few returning classes from PoE 1 that will be available on early access launch. For those of you that didn't play PoE 1, the Witch is going to be your best bet for fulfilling a summoner archetype, at least for the early access, and even though there doesn't seem to be a dedicated Ascendancy available for it yet, I'm sure there will be in the future. They have access to a plethora of minions, curses, as well as fire, bone, and blood related magic. The 2 available Ascendancies are going to be Infernalist and the Blood Mage. The Infernalist Ascendancy seems to fully dive into the Hellfire theme of the Witch, with one of its signature aspects allowing you to transform into an awesome looking flying fire demon that vastly increases the power of your spells, but also applies a ramping dot to you, and once you reach 1 life, you transform back into a human. With further ways to augment this, such as being able to cap off the dot that is applied to you at 10 stacks, it may be possible to maintain this form for very extended periods of time, plus you get a Hellhound. The Blood Mage Ascendancy is definitely a prime candidate among many veteran players for being one of, if not just the best Ascendancy in the game, just at first glance though, since we do have limited knowledge on items and how they may or may not interact with all of the Ascendancies. But from a baseline, it definitely looks strong, with access to things like 10% of spell damage being leeched as life, infinite duration of your curses, and even increased critical strike damage, plus a flat increase to your base crit chance, which for those of you that don't know is usually very hard to come by and extremely powerful. The Blood Mage is likely to be a very strong choice for anyone looking to play a caster, bleed, or curse focused build. Moving on to the Warrior, and this is effectively the class for those of you that like to do a little uka-chuka and zug-zugging, and honestly, he seems pretty similar to the Marauder from POE 1 if you're familiar. If you're looking for a melee archetype, but you want something that operates a lot slower than the Monk and also packs a bigger punch, or if you have a special interest in the sword and board playstyle, then this is probably going to be the class for you. In general, the Warrior seems to excel at large slam attacks, stunning his enemies, totem-based gameplay, all while likely being one of the tankiest and safest options you might be able to go with at the start of early access. The two available Ascendancies are Titan and Warbringer. The Titan is going to be the quintessential slammer, laying down massive hammer attacks, splitting the earth, causing lava to shoot up, and all of that good stuff. In specific, some of the interesting choices you're going to have are being able to give your slams a 20% chance to cause an aftershock, and making every other slam be ancestrally boosted, which provides 20% extra damage and area of effect. Beyond that though, he does have some more unique options I thought I'd mention, such as being able to increase your inventory space by 20, which provides no real player power, but it paths you to a different node that gives you 50% increased effect of small passive skills, which presumably is going to provide a ridiculous amount of player power. The Warbringer, on the other hand, is definitely shaping up to be your go-to Ascendancy if you like totem-based gameplay. And for those of you that don't know, totems are sort of like a stationary minion that have a wide variety of different effects depending on the specific totem you decide to cast. Some of the unique aspects of the Warbringer is being able to passively summon ancestral spirits whenever you do summon a totem, giving your curses infinite duration similar to the Blood Mage, and also a very hefty defensive tool that makes 20% of damage taken by you get redirected to your totems instead. And finally, we have the Ranger, another one of the classes returning from POE 1 that will be available on early access launch. For those of you that are familiar with POE 1, then I'll just tell you right away that the Ranger is shaping up to be very similar at first glance. We obviously haven't seen the third Ascendancy yet, so that may end up being different, but there's just no way to tell right now. Long story short though, the Ranger is for those of you that aspire to be Legolas from Lord of the Rings, but significantly better. The signature weapon is obviously going to be the bow, and in addition to that, they do have an affinity for being extremely quick/agile, as well as littering the screen with massive amounts of poison and lightning AoE damage. The two available Ascendancies are Deadeye and the Pathfinder. The Deadeye really dives into the marksmanship affinity of the Ranger, having a heavy focus on just dealing massive damage with your bow in almost all scenarios. Some of the notable aspects of the Deadeye though that are worth noting is that you can get additional projectiles for projectile skills obviously, and this interesting point blank/far shot mechanic that makes you do up to 20% more damage that incentivizes you to either be extremely close to your opponent or very far away for maximum benefit. It's also worth noting that they seem to have some interplay with frenzy charges in some pretty cool ways, such as having a 30% chance to immediately gain full frenzy charges, which sounds pretty great for mapping. For those of you that aren't familiar, frenzy charges are a stacking buff that give you attack speed, cast speed, and extra damage. The Pathfinder Ascendancy is a bit different and has a more focused approach based around poison damage, as well as a unique concoction mechanic. Some of the notable poison-related nodes give you the ability to spread your highest quality poison present on a target to other targets close by the moment that you deliver a killing blow, as well as being able to double the amount of poison stacks you can inflict. As for the concoction mechanic, you essentially get to choose between 5 different concoctions, all representing a damage type: poison, lightning, cold, fire, and finally bleed, and then you utilize your mana flask charges to throw your preferred concoction. You're also able to pair this with something like generating 50% additional flask charges, which may be very beneficial if you're really trying to hone in on the concoction playstyle. And that's going to wrap up the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you feel like I missed anything or you have any constructive criticism, feel free to let me know down in the comments. I'll make sure to pin it, or I'll try and make a note of it in the description or something like that, as this was my first POE video, and I've only got 1500 hours in POE 1, so I'm basically a brand new player. Other than that, make sure to subscribe for more future content, and I hope your experience with POE 2 is amazing. Good luck out there, Exiles. And last but not least, take it easy, chefs.